So, you have a history test coming up and you forgot to study. And you need a quick review of the Cold War. Don't worry because I got you. The Cold War is a significant event in United States history. Today I'm going to be telling you about the conflict mainly between the United States and the fallen Soviet Union in the years of 1947 to 1991. I'll be telling you how this conflict started, one of their major events, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and how it ended. Let's get this video review started. I'll be telling you all about this major conflict kicked off. Before we get into how this all happened, we need to talk about the very end of World War II. The United States and the Soviet Union fought as allies during the end of World War II. Their relationship began to tense up because of what they believed in. The Soviet Union had believed in communism, while the United States had capitalism. Distrust began to form, and because of post-war expansion of the Soviet Union, they put fear into Americans. The leaders at this time were Stalin and Truman. One major word to understand is containment. Containment is a policy presented majorly by the United States to prevent the spread of communism around the world. Because of this idea of containment, President Harry Truman introduced the Truman Doctrine. This doctrine stated that he would help countries around the world threatened by communism. After World War II ended, Stalin was in charge of Eastern Europe. He was supposed to let them all have elections to decide what they would become. Instead, he just made them all communist. Because of this iron curtain formed around the Eastern and Western Europe, Berlin was split into two, the capitalist West and the communist East. To help with the economic problem in Europe, the United States sent out the Marshall Plan to help out with economic recovery. The countries under communist regime like Czechoslovakia couldn't get economic aid. With the signing of NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Agreement, this was seen as a declaration of the Cold War. Now that we have an understanding of how this major conflict started, we can go into one of the huge events. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a huge event that could lead to nuclear war. In 1959, Fidel Castro overthrew the Cuban government and started a revolution. After the revolution, Cuba decided to go communist. America got worried and decided to invade with the Bay of Pigs invasion, which was a huge embarrassment for the United States. Fidel was still worried about the impending threat to his regime, so he called the new Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev to put the medium-range nuclear missiles in Cuba, since they were both communists who hate America. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a 13-day event in 1962 between the nuclear-armed Soviet missiles. On October 14, 1962, a U-2 spy plane flew over Cuba and discovered the missiles. President JFK and his ex-com team decided this was unacceptable, and he decided to send out a quarantine around Cuba in search for any Soviet ships. They called it a quarantine because the blockade would be an act of war and they didn't want a nuclear war to fall out. The Soviet Union in response went into full combat readiness, and in response the United States did the same thing. Kennedy began to draw up plans for invasion of Cuba. The same day a U-2 spy plane was shot down over Cuba, a Soviet submarine mistakenly thought war had begun. A day before the invasion was supposed to take place, Khrushchev sent a letter to Kennedy and said that he would remove the missiles if the United States would not invade Cuba. In own private terms, they agreed to take out the missiles in Turkey. This was the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the following year a hotline was established between Washington and Moscow. Now that we have an idea of how bad the situation was, let's get into how it ended. The Cold War had an economic and physical toll on both sides. The war ended mainly because the Soviet Union had dissolved and the Iron Curtain between the Eastern and Western Europe fell. The Soviet Union had got a new leader. His name was Mikhail Gorbachev. He was different from most communist leaders because he let the people decide what they wanted to do. He began a philosophy of glasnost, which is openness, and perestroika, which is reconstruction. With changes in the Soviet Union, the other countries held by them began to reform in Eastern Europe. A big difference could be seen in Berlin. The wall between East and West Berlin fell, and the city of Berlin was united. The Soviet Union itself dissolved, and the Cold War came to an end. The Cold War is a major part of history. It helped make connections between countries and even destroyed some too. The reforms we have seen in the fallen Soviet Union have helped form the modern Russia we know today. I hope this was helpful for your quick review and hope you get an A on your test.